Good morning. Welcome to the UU Church of Tampa. And no, I'm not Judy Lane. I wouldn't mind having that hair, though. She couldn't be here with us today, so I'm filling in for her. So, my name is Benedict, and so I'll be your worship associate for today. I welcome you to this community just as you are. Peaceful, unrested, antsy, blissfully happy, and anywhere in between. This is a time to celebrate and acknowledge the joy, comfort, and sometimes the challenges we face as a community. Welcome. I have one announcement as a reminder that next week for Memorial Day, we will not have an in-person service. You may go to the YouTube channel and choose any pre-recorded service of your choice if you like, or there will be a previous service, a link to a previous service for Memorial Day specifically in the blast. So enjoy your Memorial Day next week. Before we begin our service, we have our stone ritual. I'll place 3 stones this morning in the bowl. The first one is for a joy for the past week. The second is for a sorrow. And the third is for an intention for the upcoming week. I placed one for our joy for last week, a sorrow, and one for an intention for the coming week.
Good morning. Our chalice lighting comes from an old friend of mine who's now retired, Bruce Southworth. For the gift of this day and for our community of spiritual nurture and compassion, we give thanks. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. May our many sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul. Thank you. And some opening words from Betts Weinecke. As we gather together this morning, may we learn to recognize and affirm the pieces of possibility, the bits of good we bring. May we encourage rather than control, love rather than possess, enable rather than envy, allowing our individual gifts to weave a patchwork of peace. The soft, deep blue of sensitivity and understanding, the red energy of creativity, the white heat of convictions, the risky, fragile green of new growth, the golden flashes of gratitude, the warm rose of love. Each of us is indispensable if we are to minister to a broken and wounded world. Together, in our gathered diversity, we form the whole. So be it. So, an abiding question I've been hearing from members of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa is something like this. What can we do to deal with the conflict that damaged the congregation several years ago and led to the sudden departure of the called minister and, over time, the loss of a substantial number of church members? I see this as a 2-part concern, actually. The first concern has to do with what happened at the time. Did some people behave badly? Was it just a collapse of effective communications? Why did so many leave the UUCT community while many others stayed? Members who stayed are asking, my God, what happened? And I suspect, but cannot know for sure, that many who packed up and left have been asking the same question. My God, what happened? That's one major concern. The other compelling concern is more related to the future. The question becomes, what can we do to prevent a future occurrence like the one of several years ago? And how shall we promote the healing from that conflict that needs to happen? We might blend these together and ask, how do we need to be together in a meaningfully different way? Indeed, the question becomes, how shall we be in community with one another? Together we've been dealing with the first concern about past events. That's what many of the private conversations I've had with UUCT members have been about. That's what the small group sessions I've hosted have largely been about. But today I'd like to focus on the other important concern I'm hearing from you all. It's more about the future. So, what has brought me, or my thinking, to this point? Well, Joan Lund has played a key role in this. You see, Joan was the winning bidder at the March church auction for one of my donations. I called it a sermon to call your very own. Joan and I both communicated by email and met in person to discuss topics and themes important to her. My takeaway is that she is broadly concerned about the future of this religious community. We talked about a variety of more specific themes and topics, but what seemed to me to be of greatest importance was this: how can we go about assuring a climate of right relations within the congregation? Hence, this is the topic I seek to address today. I hope I do okay, and Joan, I hope we're still on speaking terms at the end. First, of course, we need to define what we mean by right relations. This is one of those terms that at first glance would seem to need no definition. Indeed, right relations within a congregation might lead to a healthy, respectful system of communications, especially involving differences within that congregation. But that's what it does. That's not what it is. I have not found a specific direct definition of right relations in any of the many discussions of community building and developing covenants that I've reviewed recently. Authors seem to talk around it, which leads us to a variety of possible definitions. Here's a set like these: behaving in wise, compassionate ways, grounded behavior, hearing everyone's voice and seeing everyone's face, embracing deep differences, speaking the truth in love, the prohibition of futile squabbles, healthy imperfectionism, and constructive argument. I could go on and on. No one of these phrases can completely capture what we mean by right relations. However, collectively, I think they help to clarify what we mean by the term. In most of the Unitarian Universalist literature I've seen, right relations and covenants go hand in hand. I don't know of a congregation that does not have a local covenant, or perhaps even several covenants, that serve to supplement, to localize the UUA's covenant that we know as the 7 principles. A year ago, I preached a sermon about covenants and their function as aspirational documents that hopefully guide our congregational life. To me, they serve as a roadmap. They define a pathway toward our ultimate objective, building a beloved community. A generation ago, the Reverend Tom Owen Toll wrote a little book about the hallmarks of healthy congregations, the necessary conditions for achieving beloved community. One of his 12 hallmarks, which, for example, include welcoming everyone, spreading our good news, and giving everyone a voice, is to have some rules for how we practice right relations. That discussion is the source of today's meditative reading. Some sort of local covenant is needed to spell out those rules. You see, one of the things we can expect to have in every church community is conflict of some kind. It is inevitable. In fact, many, if not most, of my ministerial colleagues believe that conflict is necessary. It can enable us to assess alternatives, to find ways to make our community stronger. Conflicting ideas about social justice issues is one example, or about stewardship, or about religious education, can all serve to give us new directions if we approach conflict through right relations among our members. In other words, a way to document right relations is to include behavioral expectations in a church's local covenant. The new covenant that was approved by this congregation earlier this month includes the phrases to accept responsibility for what we do and say, to communicate with one another in kindness and support, and to assume the best of intentions. These simple, straightforward principles serve to remind us how we should be with each other. For me, it's enough. Yes, it's aspirational. These words represent what we seek to have happen. Of course, we're human, and that means we're going to come up short from time to time. What shall we do about this inevitability? This is a key question, but let me come back to it in a moment. Many Unitarian Universalists believe that we really need another covenant, namely a covenant of right relations, in order to stave off unresolvable conflict. Such a supplemental covenant would likely spell out in greater detail how right relations ought to be maintained in a church community. Personally, I don't believe that additional covenants are necessarily advisable. If we can manage conflict with simpler rules and documents, a specialized covenant of right relations is not needed, in my view. Indeed, if we're really good at mitigating unhealthy conflict, then someday I'm going to be able to say to you, you know, I want to thank you for being such a pain about the such and such project, because I learned from you. So what do we actually do about inevitable conflict? How do we maintain right relations in the face of friction within the church community? And I'm getting at what I see as a typical problem with covenants. How do we get back into right relations when someone or some group violates that covenant that we seek to maintain? This, to me, is the real key to achieving right relations within a church. We need a mechanism, a method, a set of tools that can facilitate the restoration of right relations when they are challenged. We need something that can get us back into our covenantal relationships when we stray from them. This church did not have such tools available when it went through painful conflict several years ago. Indeed, I believe this is a problem in many religious communities. We have formal statements that encourage right relations, but no practical way to help us get back into covenant when times of stress arise. We need practical tools. Now, in the past year or so, this congregation has indeed taken steps, important steps, to develop such tools. Let me review what you have accomplished. As the dust settled from the strife of 2019, and as everyone began to struggle with the pandemic lockdown that soon followed, the leadership of the church commissioned a committee to work on right relations within the congregation. This committee came to be known as the Healthy Relations Team. After it became evident that prompt assistance from our denominational offices was not possible, an experienced organizational consultant and clinician, Dr. Sid Chero, was engaged. In early 2021, Sid and the Healthy Relations team began planning a series of workshops for members of UUCT. These were designed to improve effective communication skills within and among church members. It was about this time when I was asked to join in the planning process in order to bring a pastoral dimension to that effort. Sid led a total of 3 workshops for church members with a focus on interpersonal communications. However, it became evident that there was a significant presence of residual anger and unresolved conflict within the community. Members realized that this required attention and led me to offer to work with small groups within the congregation as the current church year approached last summer. These events began to play out before I offered to come on board as a half-time contract minister. And as I said, in May of 2021, I offered a sermon about covenant and how these agreed-upon commitments among the members of a congregation can help to fend off conflict. But the thing about covenants, as I have argued, is that they often don't address what is supposed to happen when that covenant is disrespected or even violated. How do you restore right relations when things have gone astray? This takes us to June of last year and about the time of our big annual UU gathering known as General Assembly, or GA. As a virtual attendee last year, I knew that one of the recurring themes of GA workshops is conflict resolution. And that led me to watch an on-demand virtual presentation about a conflict resolution tool that I soon realized could really help this church. It could help with the residual conflicted feelings about the past, as well as the inevitable future conflicts that will arise. Most of you heard me talk about this tool, which is known as Restorative Circles. Having seen this rather involved process in practice, in action, I arranged to attend the online facilitators class that was being offered by the GA workshop leaders later in the summer. Of course, I also agreed to become your contract minister over the summer as well. And after completing that program and wearing my new minister's hat, I began to encourage the Healthy Relations team to view that virtual GA workshop and to consider signing up for one of the periodic online facilitators classes. 4 team members, 2 other church leaders, and I attended that course last winter. The 5th team member is attending the course right now. I'm gratified that the Healthy Relations team is enthusiastic about the practice of restorative circles, and I look forward to that committee becoming the go-to resource when disagreements arise and right relations come under challenge. As you probably know, the church also has in place now a Committee on Ministry, or as it's called here, the Committee on Congregational Ministry. Their focus will be on how well the various ministries of the church are being carried out. You're going to have 2 resources to consult in the event that disputes arise. But having a restorative circles system in place makes sense to me. Such a system will emphasize effective communication through its bedrock fundamental practice of reflective listening. If you've participated in any of the small group sessions I've hosted this year, you've been exposed to the practice of reflective listening. If not, you'll want to attend the after-church discussion that the Healthy Relations team is hosting today after church to learn how it works. They'll be gathering out in the gazebo after you have a chance to grab a cup of coffee, I understand. The Restorative Circles method has had demonstrable success in UU congregations. It has, in fact, worked in other church communities that are very much like this one. Furthermore, I believe that we need tools or methods to help us get back into right relationship with one another when disputes arise and get out of hand, as I have said. Restorative circles can be the needed tool, and this congregation has a good start on making it so. So I'm a strong believer that I agreed to be one of the presenters for a new Restorative Circles virtual workshop at General Assembly next month in June. So if you're attending virtually or in person, you'll have on-demand access to the workshop, which has already been recorded. If you're not, then these on-demand workshops are generally made available to everyone in late summer. So be patient, but you might have a chance to have to wait a couple of months to see it. It's my first GA workshop presentation in about 15 years. So I'm enthused about it, as well as being enthused about the benefits of having a restorative circle system in place here in this church. So, let me distill all of this down to just a few statements. Right relations, or healthy, respectful communications within this church community are essential in meeting the goal of pursuing beloved community. 2, when things go astray, and they will do so, we need mechanism or tools that can get us back on track. And 3, Restorative Circles provides such a tool, and it does so with its deliberate focus on right relations. Right relations. For some reason, thinking about all these issues and conflict and so forth reminds me of an old joke. He says, "How do you feel about Western civilization?" She says, "I think it would be a good idea." That's often how congregations feel when conflict arises. What are we going to do? What is this about? Achieving right relations is not some kind of afterthought. We're in the midst of a conflict, so now we need to practice right relations. Rather, it needs to be there, integral to the community. So, how do we get this started? We already have. And I invite you to join a couple of members of the Healthy Relations team in the gazebo after the service to discuss this morning's issues and to get a taste of what some of the principles of restorative circles are. Finally, let me thank Joan Lund for sponsoring my effort today. I have great confidence that the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa has a bright future. Right relations, as far as the eye can see. May it be so, and amen.